Black History Month tribute to African American music and musicians that shaped the world. Tonight, I'm going to be reading to you from the Cleveland article 50 Most Important African American Music Artists of All Time. Billie Holiday, Chuck Berry, James Brown, Louis Armstrong, Led Belly, B.B. King, Sam Cooke, and Mahalia Jackson. That should just about cover every major musical genre from the last 150 years or so. And what all of those artists have in common is that they are African American. Most popular American music genres began with Black performers. And now is the time to honor that fact, okay? I just want to stop here and say there's a whole lot of negatives that we hear in America about Black people. But Black History Month is a time that we get to say, we are listening to a lot of propaganda. Let's look at the facts. Black History Month is about facts. And when you look at the facts, you see the Black folks in America, especially African Americans, they're not sitting on their butts like people want us to think. They're productive, they're creative, and they're changing the world. And one of the ways they have changed the world is with their music. Let's keep on reading. Most popular American music genres began with Black performers. And now it's time to honor that fact. With it being African American Music Appreciation Month, we decided to count down the 50 most important Black music artists of all time in the United States. I think it's a whole lot more than 50. I looked at the list. Some of my artists were not on that list. But if we were to name it, we would not get the list done. So the article honors that. So let's keep reading. As you can imagine, this wasn't an easy list. First, these are American artists, which is why you won't see artists like Bob Marley or Fela Kuti. Second, there are more than 100 musicians and singers that could have made the cut. To highlight that fact, here are our honorable mentions. Al Green, Bad Brains, Big B Burnsy, Big Joe Turner, Blind Lemon, Jefferson, Coleman Hawkins, Dizzy Gillespie, DJ Kool Herc, Donna Summer, Earth, Wind and Fire, Etta James, Jackie Wilson, Jay-Z, Jelly Roll Martin, John Lee Hooker, Lonnie Johnson, Ma Rainey, Martha and the Vandellas, Odetta, Ornette Coleman, Roy Brown, Scott Joplin, Son House, The Drifters, The Four Tops, The Isley Brothers, Tupac Shakur, Whitney Houston, Willie Dixon, and Wyani Harris. None of those artists made the cut. Yet, you could make a case for each. Heck, the list of honorable mentions could have and should have been long, but we couldn't go on forever. Here's who did make the cut. The 50 most important African American music artists of all times based on influence, body of work, and cultural impact. Howlin' Wolf, sometimes overshadowed in the history of Chicago blues by Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf's influence on the city and his overall impact on the blues genre can't be denied. Chester Arthur Bennett possessed one of the most powerful and distinctive voices in the history of the blues, which served as the driving force behind versions of some of the genre standards, including Spoonful and Smokestack Lightning. 49. Thelonious Monk. An essential figure in bebop and a pioneer of modern jazz, Thelonious Monk's style and uncanny ability as a performer paved the way for future artists, while his innovation on the piano was second to none. Number 48. Little Walter. Influenced by Sonny Boy Williamson and Louis Jordan, Little Walter took the blues harp to new heights. He is arguably as important as his instrument, the blues harmonica, as Jimi Hendrix is to the guitar and Louis Armstrong is to the trumpet. Dinah Washington. Woo! beautiful woman, has been called the most popular black female recording artist of the 1950s. Her success at a time when the recording industry wasn't necessarily friendly to women or black performers was astonishing. Her work would pave the way for the pop stardom for future black female artists. 46. NWA. NWA didn't invent gangster rap. Schoolie D did, but the group brought it to the masses, forever changing the hardcore nature of rap that artists like Tupac Shakur, the Notorious B.I.G., and Snoop Dogg would follow. NWA also spawned the influential solo careers of Dr. Dre and Ice Cube. 45. Tina Turner. Go girl. It's impossible to write the story of Tina Turner without mentioning Ike Turner, a highly influential and controversial figure himself in the history of black music. However, Turner's voice and ability as a performer was second to none, both as part of Ike and Tina and as a solo performer who took the 1980s by storm. She changed the way the rock and roll industry and fans viewed African American female performers. Don't you just love Tina? Woo! Number 44, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Following the innovations of DJ Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash would take the art of turntablism to the next level, developing many of the techniques that would serve as the backbone for the formation of hip-hop. Then with the Furious Five, he would release The Message, a socially conscious song that would push rap music beyond just a playful party genre. Number 43. Curtis Mayfield. As the leader of the Impressions, Curtis Mayfield marked the moment when social and political awareness invaded soul music with the group's landmark single, People Get Ready. It was a watershed moment in music history. That alone might be enough to put Mayfield on this list. But his solo career was equally as remarkable, redefining R&B and funk music while influencing the likes of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Jimi Hendrix, and Sly Stone. 42. Ruth Brown. There's a reason Ruth Brown's induction performance opens the Power of Rock Experience film inside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's Conner Theater. She may very well have been the first queen of R&B, establishing Atlantic Records as a hit-making force that would drive the careers of Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, and Wilson Pickett. Brown would experience a career resurgence in the 1980s that will help her finally garner the admiration she deserved. Number 41. George Clinton in Parliament Funkadelic. George Clinton had his hands in a lot of things, but his legacy is headlined by two impactful groups, Funkadelic and Parliament. The former became the driving force behind psychedelic funk, while the latter would put on a high-energy stage that would influence numerous performers from funk to hip-hop. Number 40, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Smokey Robinson's greatest achievement was serving as the songwriting force that helped build Motown Records. But his group, The Miracles, was also the label's first supergroup. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles was responsible for releasing some of Motown's first big hits, including Shop Around and You Really Got a Hold on Me, not to mention the landmark songs that would come out later, such as Track of My Tears and The Tears of a Clown. Number 39, Bo Diddley. Few artists were as essential in transitioning blues music to what would become rock and roll as Bo Diddley. Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, and Chuck Berry would all take cues from Diddley, okay? Yet his use of different techniques and rhythms was also prove a major influence on popular music for generations to come, including hip-hop. Number 38, Marianne Anderson. Marianne Anderson became a singing sensation decades before the civil rights movement reached its peak in the 1960s, which means she faced an even bigger struggle than most artists on this list. Despite being a popular star, Anderson faced racism throughout the 1930s and 1940s, and yet still managed to break down barriers. Her 1939 performance on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in front of an integrated audience of more than 75,000 people stands as one of the greatest moments in the fight for equality, both in the music industry and culture in general. Louis Jordan. Louis Jordan had a profound impact on several African American music genres that evolved during the first half of the 20th century. He simplified swing music. He helped make jump blues, jazz, and boogie-woogie mainstream forces. Jordan's legendary work would serve as a precursor to modern blues, rock and roll, and R&B music. Number 39, Nina Simone. It might be harder to name an artist Nina Simone did not influence. Oh, I agree. The list includes Aretha Franklin, Beyonce, Madonna, Kanye West, Bono, Lauryn Hill, Cat Stevens, Mary J. Blige, Van Morrison, Sade, and numerous others. Simone's voice stands as one of the most versatile and powerful in music history, Simone's voice stands as one of the most versatile and powerful in music history, tackling various genres including gospel, folk, jazz, blues, and R&B. Simone accomplished all of this while also serving as a leading civil rights activist in her time. Number 35, Sly and the Family Stone. Aside from James Brown, perhaps no artist was a greater force in the growth of funk music than Sly Stone. Sly and the Family Stone would help push funk and the psychedelic soul into the mainstream. But it was the group's later period of darker, more socially conscious music that would prove even more influential, bringing together a variety of genres and diverse musicians to push the boundaries of how popular music could be created. Number 34, Public Enemy. Simply from a sonic standpoint, Public Enemy was highly influential on hip-hop. The band's use of jazz and funk to create hard-hitting dance beats courtesy of the Bomb Squad, would set a new template for rap groups. With that as the backdrop, Chuck D and Flavor Flav's political commentary would prove a game change. Despite its unrelenting message, Public Enemy would still conquer the charts, proving that you didn't need to sacrifice ideals to go gold. Number 33, The Temptations. It took longer than most Motown groups were used to, but the Temptations eventually became the iconic label's signature act. The group's vocal harmonies, style, and dancing would become the blueprint for soul groups moving forward, with a collection of songs that would become some of the most coveted in music history. Number 32, Otis Redding. Driven by his gospel background, Otis Redding will become perhaps the greatest voice in soul music history, as well as one of the greatest live performers of all time. But his influence wasn't limited to R&B. Redding's voice would also be studied by some of the great rock singers of the 1960s and 70s, e.g. Robert Plant, Rod Stewart, etc., in developing their blues sound. Do you feel the gift of black music to the world? Do you feel it? Just every space that black music has influenced. Number 31, T-Bone Walker. B.B. King, Eric Clapton, Albert King, and Stevie Ray Vaughan all get credited as being the greatest blues guitarists of all time. But that crown really goes to T-Bone Walker, who pioneered electric blues by becoming the first artist to make the electric guitar a solo instrument and a true centerpiece of his stunning live shows. Number 30, Run DMC. Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, or even Blondie's Rapture, often get credit for being the first mainstream hip-hop songs, but they were not indicative of what the genre would become. Run DMC will become the first act to establish the blueprint for rap stardom, beginning with soccer MCs before moving on to much bigger things. That would include the birth of mainstream rap rock with the cover of Aerosmith's Walk This Way. 29. Lead Belly. Lead Burley was a virtuoso of his time who could play several instruments and became as influential on early folk music as any white artist. His powerful voice was ahead of its time, while his rendition of songs like Goodnight Irving, Midnight Special, and Where Did You Sleep Last Night are standards of the genre. Nat King Cole! Considered by many to be the greatest jazz singer of all time, Nat King Cole pioneered the style of jazzy, smooth crooning that would become popular in the 1940s. Cole would also go on to create the template for the jazz ensemble with his iconic trio before becoming a huge TV and movie star at the time when the transition from music to film was by no means a regular occurrence. The Supremes! Diana Ross, the greatest female singing group of all time that released an astonishing 12 number one singles on the Billboard Hot 100. Led by Diana Ross, the Supremes would help pave the way for every black female performer that followed, with an influence that extended to Broadway and film with Dreamgirls. 26. Bessie Smith. Along with Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith would serve as one of the early and most influential voices in blues music. More than any other woman, Smith brought the sound to the mainstream, allowing her to perform in front of the biggest audiences of the day while setting the standard for generations of blues singers that followed. 25. Sam Cooke, the ultimate voice. Name your favorite soul singer, and they were influenced by Sam Cooke. From Al Green and Aretha Franklin to Usher and John Legend. Few black artists of the 1950s would prove as popular as Cooke, who used his success to fight for equality and the ability for African Americans to perform in front of integrated audiences and gain control of their music in the recording industry. W.C. Handy. When you're known as the father of the blues, you rank among the most influential artists in all of music history. Handy didn't invent the blues, but it was his early song that first used the word blues that would become the genre's first published songs to reach a national audience. Number 23. Charlie Parker. When you think of jazz and the hipster vibes that go with it, you think of Charlie Parker. The man known as Bird was the master of the saxophone and the most important figure in the instrument's history. Parker was also one of the first jazz artists to create truly complex and advanced compositions, changing the way jazz music will be created from the late 1930s onwards. 22. Mahalia Jackson. A civil rights activist, considered one of the most important figures in the history of gospel music. Mahalia Jackson's voice was definitive, and her work as an activist would bring her close to the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. Jackson would go on to become a primary influence for future legends like Aretha Franklin, Little Richard, Ruth Brown, and Solomon Burke. See, I just want to take a minute here to pause and talk about how for us as blacks and for African Americans, music is also resistance. Okay? Music is resistance. So let's remember that being able to hear our music, let our music come through, that's liberating, and just try to affirm that. Number 21, Little Richard. As important to the development of rock and roll as Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, or anyone you can name, Little Richard's impact wasn't just limited to his music. His live shows would make him the archetype for the rock and roll performer, helping him influence everything from rock and R&B to funk and hip hop. Prince was a musical talent like no other. He had the performance skills of James Brown, the ability of a classically trained musician that allowed him to be able to play more than 30 instruments. He had the vision to give the world Purple Rain. Woo, Woo. And he was both prolific and diverse, releasing 39 albums during his lifetime that ranged in style from rock to funk to R&B and new wave and pop, industrial music, and hip hop. B.B. King. B.B. King is the first name that comes to mind when you think of the blues. He is that B.B. King is number 19 and Prince was number 20. B.B. King is the artist most responsible for spreading the popularity of blues. Everything from King's stunning guitar playing to his thrilling voice has become a staple of American culture. There isn't a blues guitarist who came after B.B. King that attempted to imitate his string bending style. Number 18, Marvin Gaye. Let's get it on. Ooh, darling, let's get it on. You know what I'm talking about. Marvin Gaye, number 18. Marvin Gaye spent the 1960s becoming Motown's biggest solo star and one of the biggest soul artists in the world. However, it was his work in the 1970s that will make an even bigger impact. What's going on? What's going on? Was a landmark achievement in the R&B genre, as Gaye became one of the first soul artists on his level to dedicate an entire album to social issues. Again, resistance. His production work on What's Going On and iconic albums that followed, such as Let's Get It On and I Want You, it would go on to influence the future of R&B music, including Quiet Storm and Neo Soul. Number 17, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Before Elvis, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry, there was a woman, and her name was Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Tharpe moved away from her gospel roots, plugged into electric guitar in the late 1930s, and became a rock star before the men considered the pioneers of rock and roll ever dreamt of doing so. She's the godmother of rock and roll. Did you know that? Did you know there's a godmother of rock and roll? Now you know. That's Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who influenced every musician traditionally identified with helping launch the genre during the 1950s. Number 16, Fats Domino. Fats Domino was the rock and roll pioneer who brought the genre to the masses and, most importantly, bringing black music to white teenagers. Domino became a massive star during the 1950s, but his music went beyond rock and roll. Built on New Orleans rhythm and blues, Domino's music would go on to impact various genres, including ska music with his single, Be My Guest. Ella Fitzgerald, number 15. Few things brought more fans to jazz music than Ella Fitzgerald's straightforward singing voice, which became a true global sensation. Not only did Fitzgerald perform with the who's who of jazz artists, but her singing style would also go on to influence some of the biggest pop stars and most important singers in the world, including Amy Winehouse, Dinah Washington, Nina Simone, Michael Bublé, Aretha Franklin, Ruth Brown, and Diana Ross. Number 14, John Coltrane. John Coltrane was a titan of jazz music, whose innovation helped spawn free jazz and reshape the genre with landmark albums including Love Supreme. Yet his impact wasn't limited to that genre. Like Miles Davis, Coltrane would have a tremendous impact on rock and roll. His improvisations proved forward-thinking enough to inspire psychedelic rockers like Frank Zappa, Jimi Hendrix, and the Doors. Number 13, Michael Jackson. I do not know how Michael Jackson is in number 13. It should be around the first 2 or 3. Michael Jackson, the biggest pop star and greatest performer of all time. Not named Elvis Presley, or maybe even surpassing the king. Michael Jackson became a breakout star as a youth with the Jackson 5. But few would have predicted just how larger than life he would become as a solo star. The albums released during his lifetime with monster records, including a blockbuster Thriller. Jackson's unprecedented success would transform the touring industry and break down color barriers. You got that right, on MTV, while influencing a countless number of performers. Remember Walk? Okay. Number 12, Stevie Wonder. It was said the world didn't know what a true musical genius was. It was said the world didn't know what a true musical genius was until a young Stevie Wonder arrived on the scene. He was just 13 when he landed his first number one song on the Billboard Hot 100 with Fingertips. Wonder would continue to release hit after hit after hit until moving into his most creative and groundbreaking period in the 1970s, when he transformed R&B into a broader art form on a collection of albums that few acts this side of the Beatles could match. Number 11, Muddy Waters. The greatest figure in Chicago blues, Muddy Waters would go on to become the defining artist when it came to Delta blues. Led by Waters, the genre would become the most impactful style of music for the British blues band that would invade America and gain mass popularity in the 1960s and 70s. One of Waters' songs would even give the Rolling Stones their name. Billie Holiday! Number 10. Billie Holiday wasn't just arguably the greatest singer of all time. Her vocal improvisations and phrasing rooted in jazz will become a hallmark of popular music throughout the 20th century. But Holiday also took her music to new heights by putting her career on the line with Strange Fruit in 1939. Again, music is resistance for Black folks. The song was an outcry against the lynching of African Americans that will become an integral part of the civil rights movement. Number 9, Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson has become a mythical figure whose life and death are rooted in mystery. One thing we know is true is that he was the first master of the Delta blues, yet he wasn't the biggest blues of his time. Johnson's impact wouldn't reach such epic heights until after his death in 1938. Muddy Waters, Elmore James, John Lee Hooker, and other blues players will become vocal about Johnson's influence, as would the pioneers of rock and roll. They would use John's blues style as a foundation for an emerging genre that would change the world. You know what I find is that behind many developments in the world are Black people, and yet those figures are so hidden, a contribution so hidden by this lie of racism. Thank God for facts. Number 8, Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington's name is as synonymous with jazz as anyone, but he was not the only greatest band leader in jazz history. He was also one of the greatest band leaders and composers in various genres of music, including classical, blues, gospel, swing, and pop music. A prolific and inventive writer, Ellington would take jazz from a more basic state and turn it into an artistic endeavor, inspiring every great jazz performer of the 20th century. Number 7, Ray Charles. Both combining blues, gospel, R&B, Ray Charles, by combining blues, gospel, and R&B, Ray Charles would pioneer soul music. In so doing, he would influence countless musicians, including the Isley Brothers, Al Green, Bobby Womack, Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, and others. Charles' success would earn him a record deal that was unheard of during the recording industry. Had things ended there, he'd be considered all-time great. Though during a time of racial unrest, Charles shocked everyone by recording an album full of country songs, modern sounds in country and western music that will become the backbone of his tremendous legacy. Number 6, R-E-S-P-C-T. Let's give it to her, give it to her, give it to her, give it to her. Aretha Franklin. Black or white, Aretha Franklin is the most important woman in the history of popular music. The Queen of Soul, as she's called, one of the most defining voices of the last 100 years. Originally a gospel singer, Franklin would merge her church singing background with an R&B style that will rule over the pop charts. It will serve as the blueprint for female pop singers during the second half of the 20th century to modern stars like Beyonce, Adele, and Christina Aguilera. Number 5, Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry didn't invent rock and roll all by his lonesome, but he was the man who took rhythm and blues and transformed it into a new genre that will ever change popular music. Songs like Maybelline and Johnny B. Good, Roll Over, Beethoven, and rock and roll music would showcase the core elements of what rock and roll would become. That sound, the format, and style were built on the music Berry created. To some extent, Chuck Berry, everyone who followed after him, was just a copycat. Number 4, Louis Armstrong. Okay, not just one of the most influential music figures in American history, Louis Armstrong is one of the most important figures in general. No artist is more responsible for the sounds of modern jazz than Louis Armstrong. Others like Duke Ellington and Jelly Roll Morton were also key. However, it was Armstrong's charisma as a performer, technical skill, and knack for melody that will make jazz the solo-driven genre, including improvisation, that it will become. It will also make Armstrong the genre's first great superstar. Number 3, Jimi Hendrix. No artist is more important to the evolution of their instrument than Jimi Hendrix was with the guitar. Hendrix drew influence from Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Steve Walker, and others, but they could not have predicted the power and emotion Hendrix would bring guitar playing. His technique and innovation with things like tone, distortion, and feedback were great game changers. His hard-hitting blues-driven rock would go on to inspire hard rock, heavy metal, grunge, and even hip-hop. You could make the case that Jimi Hendrix influenced more artists than any act not named the Beatles. Number 2, James Brown. A lot of things in a list like this are up for debate, but here are 2 facts we know. James Brown's landmark recordings mark the origins of funk music. And he is the most sampled musician of all time. Funk brought a new type of rhythm to African American music that was as danceable as anything that has ever been released. The genre's impact, and Brown specifically, would go on to serve as the building blocks for hip-hop, as Brown's hits will be on turntables and rap over from the 1970s to modern day. Quite simply, R&B, hip-hop, and dance music wouldn't be what they are today without James Brown. Number 1, no one know who number 1 is? Take a guess. Miles Davis. There are other artists on this list directly responsible for the creation of musical genres, but perhaps no musician, black or white, embodies the spirit of American music more than Miles Davis. Not only is the most iconic figure in jazz, which has been dubbed America's original art form, but David's evolution as an artist took him from basic jazz principles to cool jazz to rock to funk and even hip hop, and transcends the ever-changing musical landscape of America. His ability to adapt and experiment and to do it on genius levels is unparalleled in music history. Let's take a moment and just give thanks to God for the wonderful gift that African Americans have given to the world. Lord God, we give you praise. We thank you for the gift of being black. Thank you for the gift of blackness in America, the gift of African Americans in America, the gift that brings music and joy to the world. Thank you, God, for the blues and hip hop and jazz and soul and funk and R&B and all that there is in between, and how you continue to bring joy to the world through these contributions of African Americans. And you know what? I also want to challenge us. Look at the rich history, okay? We look at the rich history of African American music. Then it makes you start to wonder, why don't we have this, celebrate this in our churches, in our communities? Is that something people need to teach us? The assumption that we can bring anything to the table, or African Americans don't have something good to bring to the table? Facts matter. And here are the facts. African Americans are great musicians. So they're great writers, great composers, great singers, great everything, instrumentalists. So one of the challenges that we at Voices of Color want to give to the American society, North American society, especially in the church spaces, let's start hearing some more of the African American contributions to our spaces. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being part of this educational moment. Happy Black History